Hi, I'm Juan Luciano. I'm a divorce attorney in New York City.
Juan, welcome to the show. Thanks so much for taking some time to be with us today. My name is Viktoria Altman. For those of you who don't know me, I am the lead SEO at BSP Legal Marketing. And we're going to have a conversation today about the potential Obergefell reversal in New York, which affects the LGBTQ marriage. And I'm going to let you take it over and explain to us exactly what this case law is.
So at this point, this is still not a case, right? The defendant on the Obergefell banner, which is a clerk, she filed a series of appeals. All of those appeals have been denied. And now she's petitioning the Supreme Court to listen to her appeal. And what that means is that the Supreme Court has the discretion to either allow her appeal to go forward, right? In which case you'll be briefed and there'll be amicus briefs attached to the papers, or not, or simply just say, we're not interested in hearing this. So this is the point we're in now, which is a very initial or superficial point. It's just a petition at this point.
Okay. And what is the original case that they're trying to reverse? What is the name of that case?
So I believe it's Obergefell. I forget who the defendant is, which is the clerk. And the case involved a refusal on the part of the clerk to grant Obergefell's, the plaintiff's, a marriage license. At the time, she was required to grant the marriage license because she was the clerk and the only official that would be able to grant this marriage license to these individuals that wanted to get married. So she refused, and they sued her to force her hand and essentially allow them to be able to go through with their marriage. They requested attorney's fees and they requested damages. And what she has appealed is the judgments against her for the attorney's fees and the damages. This is why this case is kind of shaky to begin with. It's not a direct attack on the law. It's like an indirect attack where she's saying, look, I shouldn't have to pay these attorney's fees and these damages because my refusal was based on my First Amendment right and my ability to exercise my religious liberty and my religious conviction, which apparently contradict the idea of gay marriages, same-sex marriages.
So why are people freaking out that this might lead to a reversal of gay marriage then?
So it all depends how the court views the case and what's their take on the case. It could be that it impacts gay marriages because it overthrows the Obergefell case, right? The Supreme Court case. But that's part of the problem and part of the reason why most experts believe that the Supreme Court will not take this petition on because it doesn't directly attack Obergefell. It kind of superficially attacks Obergefell. It's sort of like a side attack. Basically, it says Obergefell placed a duty on this clerk that is unconstitutional, right? That's part of the shakiness of the case for the clerk. It's not a direct attack. And why are people freaking out? Frankly, I think a lot of it has to do with misinformation. I think that folks are being told that their marriages are going to be invalidated. There's a sort of all kinds of implications in terms of rights, legal rights, social security, immigration, and parenting. And I think that people are freaking out because they think those rights are going to be threatened.
So they're not going to be threatened.
No, I'll speak specifically for New York. New York has its own same sex marriage statute, which is the Marriage Equality Act. It was passed on June 24th, 2011. So we have our own statute that protects same sex couples and permits them to get married and enjoy all the benefits of any married couple. In addition to that, in 2022, Congress passed the Respect of Marriage Act. And the Respect of Marriage Act forces the federal government and every other state government to recognize a gay marriage that occurred legally in another state. So, for example, if someone gets married in New York and they are petitioning in an immigration context for a spouse, the immigration services will have to recognize that. Same thing with Social Security benefits. But if that married couple were to move to a state that does not recognize same sex marriage, they will have to recognize that same sex marriage under the Respect of Marriage Act from 2022.
Got it.
I think part of the problem that people had was that they thought it was going to bring them back to pre Obergefell, where we had like different states with different rules and recognition in one state versus another. But we're not going to go back to that. We're going to go back to it in some sense that if you want to get married in your home state and your home state does not recognize a same-sex marriage, you're going to have to travel to another state to do it. But once you are legally married in any state that allows for same-sex marriage, every state and the federal government will have to recognize your marriage. So that's a whole different world than the pre-Obergefell.
Yeah, I think maybe just as a layperson, another reason why people are freaking out is because we all thought Roe was set in stone and that got overturned. And now women are losing their rights all over the country. And so the parallels there are pretty apparent to someone like myself who's not a lawyer.
If, let's say, the Respect of Marriage Act of 2022 is overturned, Congress goes back on it. Because before that, they had the Defense of Marriage Act, which actually did the opposite of the Respect of Marriage Act. It prevented other states from having to, and the federal government from having to recognize gay marriages in states. So that could happen. And if that does happen, which would create all sorts of chaos, citizens of New York will still be able to get married in New York and enjoy the benefits of being married and rights that come with that in New York. I can understand the comparison with Roe v. Wade because it could essentially go back to state rights. I just want to emphasize this because I think part of the way I operate, I like to bring calmness to people. We are far from that, right? The matter that is attacking over has not been accepted by the Supreme Court, right? So we haven't met that step yet. The Supreme Court has to actually hear it and consider it. And if the Supreme Court were to overturn Obergefell, then there's still this Respect of Marriage Act, right? So you will need an act of Congress. So we're very far from the pre-Obergefell days. I don't want people to think, well, there's a chance that my world is going to be upended, because at this point, that chance is very remote.
Got it. So does this affect all people who are getting married today? Should they be thinking about prenups, or people who are in marriage, should they be thinking about postnups in order to protect their rights, even if there's a very small chance, if they're doing a prenup anyway? Is there anything they should be including in there?
I don't think at this point today, same-sex couples have to do a prenup or a postnup any more than any other couple. They have the same interest in doing that. I personally think that everyone should do a prenup.
My ex-husband would agree with you.
Well, I just think it's less complicated when the time for divorce comes. So I think it's a good idea for everyone to do that, but there's no urgency or necessity to do that for same-sex couples any more than any other type of couple.
Okay. So is there any other thoughts that we should cover? I know I sent you a bunch of questions, but it sounds like folks don't need to necessarily worry about this because we are so far away from any kind of legal ramifications. Is there any other kind of thoughts we should cover on this podcast?
I actually had this question when the elections were coming, and one of my clients had this question while we were going through a same-sex divorce. I think at this point, it's too early to start thinking about what corrections to make or what precautions to take, especially because the threat is not that well defined yet, right? We're so far away from any real threat. I think everyone should just remain calm, continue to live their lives, and see what happens next.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So if there's other changes, hopefully we won't have to revisit this topic again, but there's other changes we'll revisit, and then we'll figure out what things folks need to be doing to help themselves protect themselves from whatever the hell is going on these days.
It's an uncertain world for sure, and a lot of things are happening that people did not anticipate. I mean, things are happening by way of executive order, which requires very little scrutiny and oversight and input from representatives and essentially people's voices. So I can understand why we're having this conversation. I think it's a good conversation to have now. And then, let's wait and see what happens. And once we get a better definition of what to expect, then we can do a better job anticipating and making corrections.
Sounds great. Thanks so much, Juan.
Thank you for having me.